This podcast has a video version. You'll miss all the stupid visual gags with this audio-only version. Go to youtube.com/@thechristianhuey/podcasts. In time it'll be available on Spotify as well. But not yet.
What's he doing?
What's the menu?
Now modeling, the latest in menswear, Mr. Richard Clark. Richard Clark. That's good. We've been worrying about your image lately, Dick. It's a little bit staid, a little bit conservative. He speaks. Only when it comes to criticizing people.
Go ahead, Ron. You can wear it. Oh. Okay, well, welcome to Sparks Bandstand, and
Salam, all you Dadu-Ron-Rons and Jack Russell Terriers. It's all you ever think about is Sparks, the only podcast, depending on how you define the word podcast, solely devoted to the music of Ron and Russell, male aka Sparks. This is episode 52, the Pulling Rabbits Out of a Hat Part 2 episode. Now, if you're listening to this podcast merely with your ears, you may not notice anything terribly different about episode 52, but if you are listening with your eyeballs, you will see yours truly jumping on the bandwagon. That's right. I have finally caught up with the hot new trend of 2005 and got myself a proper YouTube show, but it's still a podcast. We'll see how much more work this is than the audio-only version. Probably way too much, but at least this way I'll know. Now let's get to it. First, God bless the late, great Mr. Hilly Michaels, the once and true U.S. Mail, and thank you, sir, for introducing the new mailbag segment. I love getting mail from listeners, especially if they're nice, and this was one of those. This one comes from Peter and Ashley. We were just listening to your Bad Manners / Growing Pains episode, where you mentioned how that soundtrack was executed with Ron's JP8 / Lindrum 2 setup a la In Outer Space, right before the switch to the Fairlight heavy sound of Pulling Rabbits. We suspect that this is not a coincidence. Our crackpot theory is that Bad Manners gave birth to Pulling Rabbits. Put another way, without Bad Manners, there would be no Pulling Rabbits, Jim. At least, not as we know it. To be less cryptic, it seems very likely to us that the earnings from making the Bad Manners soundtrack paid for Ron's Fairlight CMI, plus the contemporaneously state-of-the-art Yamaha DX7. Considering that back in 1984, the price of a Fairlight was comparable to that of a high-end Porsche, how likely is it that proceeds from In Outer Space, they threw in Outer Space, I'm not sure if they meant In Outer Space or if they meant Bad Manners. Anyway, how likely is it that proceeds funded that extravagance? Of course, Ron took very good care of his investment and got a lot of mileage out of it. In archival performance videos, you can see it on stage with him years after it was arguably obsolete. Some other random observations on Pulling Rabbits. We wonder if progress isn't, in part, a paean to the brand new hardware. An all-new design. I'm an all-new design with an all-synthetic spine. Those are the lyrics to the song Progress. Also, are we the only ones to notice how much Russell singing on that track sounds like Gary Newman? And the Newman-esque lyrics? One more tangential item. We recently listened to The Girl is Crying in Her Latte listening party episode, which we loved, but we were a bit perplexed that only one member of the panel even came close to what we consider is the most plausible interpretation of When You Leave. It seems clear to us that both of the voices are in Ron's head. The first is his inner critic, not just some asshole at the party, spinning increasingly absurd, paranoid, FOMO-driven delusions, acting out King Lear in Mickey Mouse ears while swinging from the chandeliers. Really? Well, that's more than enough for now. Keep up the great work. We love all the background research and in-depth song-by-song discussion. P.S. One more thing. I'm including a photo of the two of us with Sparks, kinda sorta, at the Boston concert this past September 11th. You thought you might find it amusing. Yours truly, Peter and Ashley. Okay, let's take a look at that photo there. That's... Can you see it? Should be right about there? No? Is it not there? Is it right there? Is it over there? Is it there? Is it there? There? Ah, I love it. Hey, Peter and Ashley! Thank you so much. I would love to know exactly how much Growing Pains Productions Incorporated had in the piggy to dole out to Sparks, especially since the movie, of course, was a total dud and had a teensy tiny budget. If it were any other band in 1984, I would say it went to Cocaine and Hookers, but seeing as how it's Sparks, Cappuccino and Hookers. Is Russell channeling Gary Newman? You know, I don't personally hear it, but I do hear Thomas Dolby. Think about that one. Finally, that is a cool theory about the song When You Leave. I'm also surprised that thought didn't pop into at least one of our heads, especially considering that I'm pretty sure we had Paul Barrett on that one, and that does seem like something that would be right up his alley. I am talking, of course, about the Paul Barrett, who is host of the excellent YouTube series Meta Sparks. Go check that out if you haven't already. And that's the U.S. mail for this episode. Okay, now back to the intro part of the intro. As it turns out, this first all-video episode went longer than I expected it to, so if you're expecting this to be the episode with the conversation between myself and Monty Mallon and John Ashdown about the second half of Pulling Rabbits Out of a Hat, I'm sorry to say that you're going to have to wait until episode 53, and we'll see about getting the video for that one. We'll see. By the way, if you haven't already subscribed to Monty's YouTube channel, Sparks Entertainment and Art, run, do not walk to your nearest internet-connected digital device, and do so at once. He's got fresh content all the time, and he interviews some incredible people around Sparks World. This most recent one, he's got the great Bob Hague, guitarist from Gleaming Spires, and of course a lot of 80s Sparks. In fact, you'll never believe this, speaking of Bob Hague, but Monty was kind enough to invite me onto a panel featuring the entire Gleaming Sparks, aka Bates Motel band. Chris Sutton, that's the author of Sparks 1969 to 1979, also joined us. So yeah, we had drummer David Kendrick, we had singer-bassist Les Baum, we had, again, Bob Hague, and we had keyboardist Jim Goodwin. These guys were all in attendance for the discussion, and it was, I'm going to say without hyperbole, the most exciting meet your heroes moment I've experienced in years. Go look for that. Now, Sparks have shown a persistent knack for continuously bobbing up to the surface of mainstream media attention for much of the last decade. This latest example is their featured role on a single by Gorillaz from Gorillaz' latest album, The Mountain, released just this past February. Now, Gorillaz' it's fun to say. Gorillaz' calling card has long been spotlighting their own musical heroes by bringing them into the studio to collaborate on songs and then exposing these veteran artists in the process to new audiences who may not have heard of these folks before. Damon Albarn and company really do know how to pay homage in the best possible way, and they have done one hell of a job on the album The Mountain. Another one of my musical heroes, by the way, the late Marky Smith of The Fall, returns from the great beyond for one of my favorite numbers, but Gorillaz really turned heads, including this one right here, with a brand new single, featuring a certain long-running duo called Sparks. The song, The Happy Dictator, is by now a tune that's probably already burrowed deep into your hippocampus, and it's impossible for it not to. And besides, Gorillaz brought Ron and Russ with them to their highly lauded appearance on Jimmy Kimmel, and they even brought them on tour with them for a few shows. Ron and Russ, they are credited as co-writers on the track, and while I'm not exactly sure how much of the music they had a hand in, it's awfully clear which Sparks era was on everyone's brain with this banger of a synth pop tune. Those chunky, arpeggiated bass lines, the propulsive disco beats, those icy hot synths. Yeah, whoever was sitting at the digital audio workstation to cobble together this little ditty had number one in heaven fever. No doubt. In a call and response that stretches throughout the whole song, Damon Albarn sings the call line of each verse in his typical arch, just the facts sort of way, and with that same megaphone-like treatment that's always on his vocals in the Gorillaz. He's portraying in the song the titular happy dictator, reassuring a despairing and destitute nation that everything will be all right as long as you hand over total unquestioning control to him. That doesn't sound familiar to me in the least. Russell sings the response, singing in the same choir of angels type of falsetto register that graces you at the back half of 1979's glorious The Number One Song in Heaven. His voice is multi-tracked to sound like a crowd of the dictator's subjects rejoicing as a single subjugated hive mind chanting, "Oh, what a happy land we live in." Russ also introduces the song via a lovely prelude that later returns to lead us into the final chorus, crescendo, and gentle fade out. I am the one to give you life again. I am the one to save your soul, amen. Did I blow out anybody's eardrums there? The Happy Dictator follows the formula of my all-time favorite pop songs. Bright, infectious melodies and lyrics that drip pitch black. Musically, it's pretty simple. It doesn't even have a proper chorus, which is interesting. Lyrically, it's also pretty simple, but this simplicity belies a profound statement of judgment against our world's recent authoritarian turn and our complicity in it. Anyway, politics aside, it's simply one of the most glorious, greatest... Actually, forget that. Let's embrace the politics as well. It is one of the most glorious, greatest, pure, unabashed pop tunes with a message that Sparks have had their names attached to in some time, and they deserve to bask in this moment.
I am the one to save your soul. No more bad news.
Now, back at Sparks headquarters proper, the Mad/Matter tour continues. The band wrapped up a group of dates pretty recently in Japan, and then to Australia and New Zealand all throughout May. And next in June, they're going to head back up north to the UK to play several cities, peppered with a few shows in the Netherlands, France, and Belgium. No word yet on a North America leg, but I hope they remember that we still have a very nice, very friendly Sparks fan base here in the U.S. Okay, so I caught you all up. Oh, one more thing. I have a baby nephew who just arrived a couple of weeks ago, and instead of buying some overpriced plastic thing for the baby shower, I recorded a new song. Yeah, I know, I'm sorry. It's at the very end of the episode. It's called Baby Wade. If you're brave enough to listen to it, you just might enjoy it. Now, enjoy the episode and dance, goddammit.
Is music still music when it's played by computer? Well, that debate may last a while, but Boyd Mattson goes on the record this morning to say it sure sounds like music.
It's great.
It's the day after the party. Nobody wants to stick around to clean up, but somebody's got to. Let's recap. In 1983, Sparks were the toast of K-Rock. They were LA's favorite sons. They had Jane Wiedlin. They had SNL. They had both Mickey and Minnie Mouse, and for a fleeting second, it looked like the Mail Brothers had finally solved the American puzzle. But the problem with solving a puzzle is that once the pieces are all snapped together, there's nowhere left to go but knock the table over. Actually, scratch that. That would have been Ron and Russell's next move if it were 1973 or 1978. But in 1984, it was kind of more like they wanted to spray a coat of gloss on the completed puzzle and mount it on a fancy frame. You see, the last few years had been good to Sparks. Pretty darn good. But not good enough. Ron and Russell walked into 1984 thirsty for more. They wanted to be bigger, they wanted to be better, they wanted real cultural relevance. And an actual hit would be nice, not just a regional one. They looked at Duran Duran's Seven and the Ragged Tiger, a record that was sleek, expensive, and it hit like a digital freight train, and they said, we want that. Give us the guy who made that. And I'm not talking about Nile Rodgers, although we will get to that. Enter Mr. Ian Little, the boy with the coolest toys. He went from complete obscurity to producing massive hits for probably the most massive music act of the day, Duran Duran. Little's life story is utterly Dickensian, at least according to the About the Author blurb printed on the jacket of his 2022 autobiography, Baptism of Fire, A Year Living and Working with Duran Duran. Right away, that subtitle tells you which part of his life and career he wants you to focus on as you read that book. It is not called My Life-Changing 10.5 Days Half-Assing a Sparks Record Before Getting Shit-Canned. Here's how his self-penned bio goes. And as badly as I want to attempt a South London accent here, I've got way too many listeners in the UK who would roast the hell out of me for doing it, so you're just going to have to imagine it. Ian Little was found in a phone box 1 or 2 days after his birth and adopted and raised by a loving family near Croydon in the southeast suburbs of London. And I apologize if I mispronounce Croydon. I'm prepared to feel stupid already. He went to art school in Kingston upon Thames and initially became an architectural apprentice and worked with the band Supertramp on the staging of their Breakfast in America World Tour. Now, that would be 1979, of course. This led to working as a studio engineer on Roxy Music's swan song album, Avalon, as well as putting out his own music under the name New Asia. With a growing reputation in music, he produced Duran Duran's biggest album, Seven and the Ragged Tiger, and the non-album smash, Is There Something I Should Know? Following this, he produced an album by Sparks and worked with Belouise Sum, who I didn't take the time to look up, so maybe look that up. Belouise, Belouise, a spiral of addiction led to a long stint of homelessness in New York. His recent years have been spent recovering from poor physical health and is now back in London in the producer's chair, and he mentors underprivileged young people in music technology. So way to go. I listened to a podcast interview with him from fairly recently, and he's very proud of the work that he does with underprivileged youth, and I think that is absolutely fantastic. His memoir, Baptism of Fire, Astral Horizon Press 2022, is his first book. Now, I've got no way of confirming if the phone box origin story is true or not, but if it is a remarkable rags to riches to rags to moderate respectability tale. Through Little, Duran Duran proved in 1983 that they could hew to their artier side, and yet they could still top the charts. Although privately, he and the band had misgivings about whether Seven and the Ragged Tiger was as good as record sales indicated, it was hard to deny that Duran Duran were in no immediate danger of being yesterday's news, even in the hyper-finicky, superficial pop climate that MTV ushered in. He had just finished a remix of the Reflex, aided in no small part by funk demigod Nile Rodgers, get to name drop him again, which soon shot to the very top of the Billboard Hot 100. The Reflex remix single was everything that Ron and Russell wanted from a pop song of their own. It was weird to the point of inscrutability. It was on the technological bleeding edge. It was catchier than a case of mono, and it was massively popular. Ian Little was supposed to be the guiding hand for Ron and Russ as they breached the threshold of this brave new world of pop music. Computer-assisted design had come to rock and roll. Or maybe you could say it came for rock and roll. At any rate, this new digital visual way of composing and producing music by way of the Fairlight CMI and its fancy new Page R composition tool with the light pen was new, it was high-tech, and it was exciting. Its proprietary light pen was used to draw the notes onto the monochrome monitor, and it was like something straight out of Star Trek. Not only could you draw notes onto the screen, but you could even draw waveforms, and the screen would interpret what you were drawing and could make sounds from scratch for you. Beyond that, of course, the CMI Fairlight had a sampler. Now, samplers weren't brand new in 1984, but this was definitely a more robust sampler. You had better quality samples, and you had more space on which to store them. Ron and Russ, having looked to Fairlight evangelists from the early 80s pop vanguard like Peter Gabriel and Kate Bush, they salivated over this chance to splash musical paint all over a similarly vast digital canvas, and here was their chance. By mid-1984, however, sadly, Ian Little was fighting demons that did not show up on a Fairlight screen. Rud Sward's book offers a plausible scenario for what exactly happened. By the way, if I hadn't mentioned yet, that's Rud Sward's book, Sparks, track by track, or is it song by song? Anyway, I've got a copy of it. It's fantastic, and I use it for the first time in preparing for this episode. Although Rud is careful to refer to this as legend, the collaboration between Sparks and Ian Little lasted exactly 1 week. And then the Mail brothers told Little to take a hike, and they did the lion's share of the work themselves. Now, I could see how a meeting of the minds was not to be between Little and Sparks. You've got the Mail brothers, the most disciplined, focused, sober architects in pop, over here, paired with a producer who was rapidly sliding into the abyss of cocaine addiction and alcoholism, over here. The straight-edge guys who brought to the table a song called Pretending to Be Drunk, placed in the hands of a guy who was off his tits. The CMI Fairlight was a highly sought-out piece of gear. It was basically the Ferrari GTO of synthesizers in 1984. However, things shook out, and it couldn't have been that pretty. Ron and Russ spent a few weeks huddled together at Oasis Studios, gazing into the monochrome green glow of the monitors, and set about constructing their own digital fortress. A question. What happens to a songwriter when you give them a grid? For a decade, at least, Ron Mail wrote songs on a piano, mostly. Sometimes on acoustic guitar, but mostly piano. Now, pianos require a certain physical attack. They have wood and wire, gravity. But the Fairlight CMI changed the geometry of a Sparks song. Using the Page R sequencer, Ron wasn't playing melodies anymore. He was inputting them. Literally, he was drawing them. I want you to think about the Lego ethos for a second, because this is how I think of this type of composition. You stack bricks of different sizes and colors together, and it all snaps perfectly in place. So it is with digital composition. Like a wall made of Legos, each row of musical bricks on the Page R screen is a separate instrument or voice. You can determine how many beats make up a measure, and that measure is your brick. Let's say you want to build a simple 4/4 drum loop. Well, you could use 2 rows, one with a kick drum sample, one with a snare sample. The kick drum row, you draw a quarter note where the first and the third note, the first and third quarter notes would go. Leaving spaces for the 2 and 4. And then for the snare drum row, you draw quarter note second and fourth, right? Until the end of time, or until the disc fills up, or until you have a better idea in the song, whichever comes first, and hey, presto, you got a rhythm track. Of course, you also have the capability of placing that note, or clusters of notes, vertically up and down the digital staff. This is how you program your melodic tracks. your lead, your bass, etc. Although I will go into all this in greater detail in a later episode, this is what is now commonly called vertical composition, after the vertically aligned stacks of tracks that can be manipulated individually. Now, vertical composition stands in contrast to, of course, horizontal composition, although you almost never have just one without the other. They're just different ways for the composer to engage with the song. In the broadest terms, horizontal composition concerns itself more with things like melody, chord changes, key changes, the what happens next of a song. Vertical composition is more about density. It's about the simultaneous. It's about stacks of voices. And what you gain from this approach is absolute clarity. But what you lose is the quirk, that ineffable thumbprint of humanness. About 85% or so of the sounds you hear that aren't Russell were made by the Fairlight CMI. But Sparks actually decided that the drum sounds weren't quite as good as they had been on the previous album, In Outer Space, using the Linn drum. So the main drum tracks that you hear on Pulling Rabbits actually are not made with the CMI. There is some percussion made with the CMI, but the majority of the drum tracks are made with the Linn drum too. One technical hurdle that Little has discussed was the difficulty of getting the Fairlight CMI and the Linn drum to talk to each other before MIDI was fully matured. This was 1984, remember, and MIDI was in its infancy. He noted that the jitter, or slight timing inconsistencies between the two machines, actually gave the album a unique, slightly nervous energy that he thought suited the Mail Brothers aesthetic perfectly. So when you listen to the songs in this album again, and listen to how the drum tracks and the other instrumental voices interplay and how they're not quite perfectly aligned. So, you could say, in a way, that the uneasy relationship between the two machines ultimately did inject something resembling humanity back onto the record.
Where's that coming from? It's like just totally destroys a lot of the image.
As for the humans, you'll occasionally hear a few guitar licks and stabs played by Bob Hague, but they sound processed to within an inch of their lives, and it gets lost in the mix anyway. And the same goes for David Kendrick, who sneaks in like the odd cymbal hit and not a whole lot more than that. You'd be hard-pressed to hear Les Boehm's bass on there at all. Speaking of the drums, this being 1984 and all, if it ain't got that gated reverb, it ain't there at all. All right, maybe I'm overstating the case, but that cartoonishly boomy, this song is destined to fill a stadium vibe is absolutely present and accounted for. We're talking about that Phil Collins, that drum break that introduces the second half of In the Air Tonight. The way it bellows, it echoes, it reverberates like a monster in your ear, that is the sound of the gated drum. That's the gated drum effect, and that is a real hallmark of the mid-'80s. Anyway, before I take apart a few of the more notable songs on the album for your gawkish amusement, let's talk about Russell's part in all this. In the early 70s, Russell's voice would soar to the heavens and dive into the tall grass and do loop-de-loops and barrel rolls all over the damn place. Even as recently as 1982's Angst in My Pants, he still had several moments of impressive vocal flourishes, while he was also trying on different characters, different pitches, timbres, attitudes. Maybe he tended to sound a little tame in Outer Space, or he favored one color, if you like, more than others. But there was a general archness to his delivery. That kind of archness that's associated with a lot of new wave vocalists.
Breaking in the future, just before the week is up, they can do it, but it's going to take some money. Conversation turned until the sun went down.
that sort of projects this sort of ironically detached coolness all across Pulling Rabbits. Russell has a bit of that going on. He leans a little bit more into sort of AOR, adult contemporary stylings. A lot less Baroque. So Russell's unfussy, but still technically very competent singing. To these ears sounds a little less engaging and a little less effortlessly cool, but it definitely did fit the moment. And if the brothers were going for a big radio hit, then, well, it made sense. But Russell sounded a little bored to me. Let's check out some of these here songs, huh? I'm just going to pick out some of the ones that really stood out to me. Let's take a look at the title track, Pulling Rabbits Out of a Hat. This is the Fairlight's finest hour on the record for me, except for maybe Progress, and we'll get to that. There's this chugging bass sound that's driving all throughout, and it undergirds all the verses. And then later on, you'll hear this sort of bell-like patch sample. That's also a major sonic element of this. But what I really want to talk about is that you're not more than a few seconds into the album, and you hear hit. Actually, it's hits, because there are two of them. Ron plays two notes with this particular sample, and the second one is an octave over the first one. Right. Now, about that. That is called the Orch 2 patch, or Orc 2, if you like. It's spelled like O-R-C-H. This is the orchestra hit. For the uninitiated, this sound was sampled from Stravinsky's Firebird. Everywhere from Yes's Owner of a Lonely Heart to Duran Duran's Own a View to a Kill, and there's a long old list of songs that use the orchestra hit, including a lot of then nascent rap, hip-hop, that maybe I'll even throw up a list. Did I do that? Great. Anyway, the orchestra hit was like the ultimate 80s power move, and this was the first time that Sparks reached for it. But let's take a look at the lyrics, okay? I'll grab the sun and the moon. I'll hold the world in my hand. These things are easy for me. I can't make you understand. Now, I can't help but think that this is somewhat autobiographical on Ron's part, or Ron and Russell's part. Who is Ron here? Well, on the cover of the album, he's a ventriloquist, and the dummy, of course, is Russell, a little bitty Russell with Ron's hand up his nether regions. I'm not really sure how that works exactly, but here Ron is the magician pulling the rabbits out of the hat, right? And he's complaining that nobody appreciates the trick. He's pulling rabbits out of a hat, he's sawing women in half, and the audience is what? Checking their watches. It's a meta-commentary on the cult band experience, or the Sparks experience, the experience being Sparks, a cult band. I'm over here doing incredible things for you, and you're still asking when that Go-Go's chick is coming back. Nobody appreciates me. That's how I read it. It's still a great song. Second song, and one I think is notable, is Love Scenes. Now, this is a Hollywood satire wrapped in a synth pop power ballad.
And soon there'll be good stuff. Love seems, I know that the two of us could play. Love seems, I know that you like
Sparks
it.
haven't done a whole lot of power ballads up to this point. I guess maybe Funny Face could be called one, but it's just so weird, I wouldn't want to call it that. The lyrics describe an actor, it's in first person, but describe an actor hitting on his co-star between takes. Anyway, it's kind of basic, it's almost shallow lyrically, but the melody is really pretty. The melody is gorgeous. There is plenty of chunky synth riffage from Ron on the Fairlight, although it's possible it could be the DX7, and he takes up all that space on the floppy there with the layers of sounds that really give Love Scenes its cascading, sweeping, enveloping feel. Friend of the pod, Daryl Easley, points out that the riff sounds like a cousin to Joy Division's Love Will Tear Us Apart. I don't know. If you listen closely, you can hear a little bit of that same melancholic descending line. Song 3 is Pretending to be Drunk. And this was one of three singles, depending on where in the world you were in 1984. That first sound that you hear when the song begins is that carnival organ-like chordal riff. It's like it's trying to start the song's engine up. A few seconds in, and you are introduced to the Fairlight's slap bass patch and the song's main rhythm track. Off in the distance, you can barely make out Bob Hague's processed guitar stabs. And that is the lone human voice, except of course for Russell's literal human voice that's audible in the recording. And everything other than arguably Russell is utterly assimilated into the machine. But you take everything, you put it together, and well, you can imagine what a thrill it must have been for Ron and Russell to watch those green chunky pixels scroll by in time with the music, all of these different rows coming together to magically make a song, a bit like a player piano for the computer age. Lyrically in the song, the theme of illusion returns. A man faking inebriation to lower a girl's guard for nefarious purposes, or perhaps just lower his own guard down, by psyching himself out or in. And there's that bridge to the song when you hear that fat, squelchy synth patch. It's the sonic equivalent of cilantro. Half of you are going to love that texture. It sounds like something actually you might hear on a Commodore 64 computer game, which I have very vivid memories of as a child. Might even remind you, if you're a listener of a certain age, to the opening theme of the 1984 Nintendo game Excite Bike, which was also on the NES. I hear it anyway. Maybe? I don't know. How about number 4? Progress.
A sense of progress is in the air. I'm an all-new design with an all-synthetic spine. I'm a new shade of pink. Give me wit and I won't shrink. You're so young, so alive. You're so 1985. I'm a scratch redesign. Wanna try me? I don't mind.
Oh, man! Progress. The way that single-minded synth bass hammers that G note and it never ever stops. The song sounds like it was written by a sex bot who's been plugged in for the first time. And you're going to get that from the lyrics, too. I'm not just a pervert. Check this out. I'm an all-new design with an all-synthetic spine. I'm a new shade of pink. Get me wet and I won't shrink. You're so young, so alive. You're so 1985. I'm a scratch-free design. Want to try me? I don't mind. Hope you got a kick out of that one. I did, and it's the nastiest Ron dares to get on the whole album. It's also the first time for Sparks to dip a toe in the kinky musical waters of Prince, where artifice can be made to be sexy, and everything else is made to be sexy too. Progress sounds taut and perky, and it features a quavering synth line that almost purrs. It's so cat-like that Madonna would basically steal that sound just a few months later for Material Girl.
Yeah, he thinks he can impress me by giving me expensive gifts.
Now, throughout the
nice.
song, a pair of sprightly, spare, and staccato piano chords tap the song from above, but it kind of feels like from underneath, if you know what I mean, and it keeps everything nice and buoyant. And, well, it just kind of makes me feel a little funny inside. I once read that the whole idea of the new romantic movement was to embrace the commercialism of the modern pop music industry, but then to fuck with it from within. I get that vibe from the song Progress. And Ron even dares to have Russ carefully pronounce the line, "You're so 1985," knowing full well that the near future would become the past about as quick as a McDonald's French fry becomes inedible. Artifice is sexy. Song number 5 is With All My Might.
The mountains may crumble and cover the road to you, but I'll fight to break on through with all my might. The ocean may rise up.
And here we really get a power ballad. This is pretty atypical for Sparks. This is an earnest love song. And this was also the only music video made for the album. It was a single as well. The video was directed by Graham Whiffler. Aesthetically, it's logically impossible for the video to be any more 1984. Now, we haven't yet reached the era of CGI everything. Dire Straits' blocky custom kitchen appliance installers were still a year away, which meant that there was still a chance to stave off the making of Minecraft. It's true that 1984 actually did see the first music video to fully incorporate computer graphics. That's the Cars You Might Think. And it helped solidify Rick Ocasek and company's position in the pop landscape of the early MTV era. But it also cost $80,000, which was a staggering amount in 1984. Few contemporary acts had that kind of dosh to throw at a technology that was at the bleeding edge, but it was still finding its feet. Sparks are seen here by way of Whiffler's art direction, trying to nick a little bit of that digitally generated feel, but they had to settle for lower tech practical effects, including green screen projections and stop motion animation, some parallax perspectives, clever light placement, ample use of a soundstage, that kind of thing. The whole business is awash in bold and bright colors, but with, kind of low-res detail. There's deep focus, there's shallow planes of action. Kind of like Whiffler's previous promo video for Sparks' Cool Places, Ron and Russell are portrayed as these exaggeratedly cartoon-like humans, caricatures of themselves, populating a completely fake world. Unlike that earlier video, however, your brain isn't assaulted by a collage of seemingly unrelated visual artifacts of late 20th century pop culture and pop history, so there's no postmodern sign to signifier sort of language that you may try and parse. It's a lot more chill than that. It's a lot more direct than that. It's kind of soothing. In fact, there's something almost Disney-like about the video for With All My Might, and its relentless family friendliness. The dramaturgical triad at the center of Cool Places is repeated here, though. You got Russell, the Lothario, riding on the back of a mechanical horse, accompanied by his love interest du jour, the pretty, blonde, but frankly generic-looking 80s print model, Lisa Accomando, who does little more than make bland goo-goo eyes at Russ or peer blankly into the lens from below the brim of her black lady Stetson. She looks like she's lifted straight from the pages of a J.C. Penney catalog, and it's hard not to wish that Jane Wheatland were here instead. Anyway, then you have the G-rated version of the Ron character in a different shot. He's goofy, he's quirky, he's gangly, he's vaguely trickster-like, but somehow he's above the narrative fray. He's also weirdly sexless, and he does a funny dance. An earlier version of this type of scenario would have Ron endeavoring to horn in on Russ's territory, vaulting himself from behind a couch where Russ is seducing an interested lady, and the camera catches Ron in mid-frame just before he lands smack in between the would-be lovers, hoping to intercept his younger brother's advances. Well, there's no Ron, the lonely, frustrated cockblocker here. He's not even really a third wheel. He's just sort of a jester. He's just off doing his own thing in some other frame. He's riding his own fake horse. He's striking these impossible, uncomfortable poses like a Looney Tunes character or Gumby, ostensibly all purely for our own wholesome amusement. The whole business looks a bit like a segment from Pee-wee's Playhouse. Blindingly colorful, fully artificial. But unlike Pee-wee's Playhouse, which hadn't existed quite yet, there's very little of the threat of playful anarchy bubbling under the surface. There's no double entendres. There's no subversion. It was the slick, inoffensive, pleasant enough video made for the slick, inoffensive, and pleasant enough love ballad that they once vowed never to make. With All My Might reached 104 on the Billboard charts. It almost worked. But almost is kind of the story of Pulling Rabbits. I've heard quite a bit of love for track number 8, a song that sings itself, and although I don't share the enthusiasm, I can see what those folks are on about, but I'm going to let Monty do all the talking for that one in the next episode. La 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 la! With the release and reception of Pulling Rabbits Out of a Hat, Sparks' manager, Joseph Fleury, the man who had seen them through the highs and lows, saw the writing on the wall. When Pulling Rabbits was completed, Fleury made the unprecedented choice of deciding not to release it in what was once Sparks' biggest market, the UK. And now that was not a decision without justification. Although the previous 2 albums did reasonably well in the States, they fizzled across the pond. Fleury later explained that, quote, too many flop albums would work against us eventually. And I think I was proven right, end quote. Oddly enough, Rabbits was also the only Sparks album to that point that was released in Argentina. Now, there were signs that they were going with the flow a little too much. It wasn't necessarily a bad thing that they enlisted the Fairlight CMI, but it's obvious that they got lazy, and they apparently used built-in patches right out of the box. Ron didn't have much in the way of inspired songwriting, I'm sorry to say, this time out. And composition-wise, there weren't very many musical surprises. The songs didn't really get a chance to earn a second life in a live setting either. They didn't tour, and they only performed a few times for a crowd throughout the year. They did make a few appearances on TV. Of course, Dick Clark's American Bandstand, their bestie, Dick Clark. They did do a few interview appearances on American TV, and they had a pretty memorable appearance on French TV. They played very few shows, and I already said all that shit. Okay. By the end of the year, Sparks had painted themselves into a corner. They played very few live shows, and only in a few spots in California and New York City, And when they did play with Bob and Les and David and Jim, sometimes in tow, they played very little from the new album. In fact, David Kendrick said that they played only Pretending to be Drunk and Pulling Rabbits Out of a Hat. The overly sequenced nature of the new songs didn't lend themselves well to a live setting. And with the Fairlight CMI, they had pretty much the same issue that they had back in 1979 with that giant Moog. They couldn't really haul the thing onto stage. They couldn't tour with it. In August of '84, they opened for the psychedelic Furs. Furs were peak cool. All leather and raspy romanticism. Sparks were two guys pushing 40, lately writing songs about Mickey and Minnie Mouse. And later that month, they were supported by a fledgling band called the Red Hot Chili Peppers. The Peppers were all sweat and chaos and socks on their cocks. Against that kind of raw energy, the male's digital precision looked like a museum exhibit, even with Dave Kendrick's propulsive drumming in that live setting. When the highlight of your year is an on-screen bromance with Dick Clark, it's time to rethink things. Even their disciples, the Gleaming Spires, were moving past them. The Spires released an EP called Funk for Children that same year, and it was their fourth release in as many years, and it was everything that Pulling Rabbits wasn't. Daring, refreshing, and it was weirdly funky. Daryl Easley, in his biography, Talent is an Asset, is brutal about the album Pulling Rabbits Out of a Hat. He calls it the weakest Sparks album and almost totally bereft of any personality. And for years, the fans all agreed. It frequently sits at the bottom of the favorite album lists. If the album has a saving grace, and I argue that it does, it's to be found in the extended dance mixes, which could also be found contemporaneously on the 12-inch singles of the singles that were released from the album. And this is where the males are free from the confines of the pop song structure, and they can really shine a lantern on this whole music composition as Legos assembly ethos that informs a lot of these songs. And it turns out that deconstructing some of these songs for the dance floor really cracks them open, and it reveals some enjoyable musical surprises and some honest-to-God, respectable dance grooves. Although initially, these alternate mixes were only on these 12-inch vinyl single releases, and that would be Pretending to be Drunk, Progress, and With All My Might. Much later, in 1996, Repertoire Records saw fit to collect these longer dance floor versions in one CD release. And they packaged it up with some dance mixes of previous Sparks songs that date all the way back to 1979. And to these ears, it is totally worth your time. In fact, maybe more than sitting through Pulling Rabbits. Ron and Russell, by now, after Pulling Rabbits went through its paces, were growing more interested in Eurodance and synthetic club music in general. Ron believed that beat-heavy synth-pop was the best vehicle for their, quote, swift-as-heck melodies. They were early fans of Erasure and the Pet Shop Boys. For their next move, they would lean into the beat, and they would try to find their voice again. And for the first time, they would handle the production duties themselves as much as possible. But they would, however, hit up their old Belgian friends, Telex, for a space to work in, and they would absorb the local Brussels Belgian scene. Sparks were determined to prove what they always believed. Every dog was gonna have its day.
At this moment, you exist as a theoretical concept. You are drifting in the silent, pre-physical void that precedes a life. It is a state of total abstraction, but the transition into reality is already beginning. Welcome to our party.
Welcome to our party. You don't know the concept of a party, but soon you will, and you'll grow to like it. Or maybe you won't, and that will be your thing. You're like a carrot cake. You don't know what that is, but you're like that. baked with twisty DNA. Hey, hey, hey. Baby, wait, you don't have the first name yet, but soon you will. And when people call it, you will swivel your head around in recognition. Baby, wait. Yeah. Welcome to our faces, ain't you lucky you got one too? When we finally see it, we'll learn to recognize you. Buy it and we'll love it, you're lucky in that way. Hey, hey, hey. Baby, wait, you don't have the first name yet, but soon you will. And when people call it, you will swivel your head around in recognition. Baby, wait. You'll have a brain to comprehend what I'm saying. You'll have a heart to feel. Sometimes it will hurt, sometimes it will leap with joy. That's the bargain. Baby, wait.
Baby, wait.
Baby, wait. Baby, wait. Baby, wait. Baby, wait. Baby,
Baby, wait.
Baby, wait.
And you turn to answer. Baby Wade.